Happy day. The future of every nation is shaped by the ideas, aspirations, and courage of its youth. Today, we come together not only to discuss economic reforms, but to inspire the next generation of leaders, policymakers, and change makers. On behalf of M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women, I extend a hearty welcome to each one of you to a special lecture on The Art of Doing Economic Reforms, Ideas to Institutions 2026, a public policy dialogue on governance, reforms, and nation building. We are deeply privileged to welcome Hon'ble Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Government of India, whose distinguished contributions continue to shape India's economic policy landscape. Sir, we are honored by your gracious presence. We will begin today's proceedings with the Tamil Thai Varthu, followed by an invocation by M. Srinidhi and S. Manaswini. I request the audience to kindly rise and remain standing for the same.
நீராறும் கடலுடுத்த நிலமடந்தை கெழிலொழுகும் சீராறும் வதனமென திகழ்பரத கண்டமிதில் தெக்கணமும் அதிசிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாடும் தக்க சிற பிறை நுதலும் தரிதனரும் திலகமுமே அத்திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் மணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே முன் சீரிழமை திரும்பி எந்த செயல் மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே 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 கஜானனா 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 பிரதம பூஜ கணராய பிரதம பூஜ கணராய கஜானனா கஜானனா பிரதம பிரார்த்தனா ஸ்ரீ கணராய பிரதம பிரார்த்தனா ஸ்ரீ கணராய லம்போதரா கணராய லம்போதரா கணராய கஜானனா 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 கஜானனா.
Thank you. The achievements and accolades of M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women will now be showcased through a short audio-visual documentary.
M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women, established in 1992 by two philanthropic trusts, today offers a portfolio of 8 departments offering 19 undergraduate, 8 postgraduate and 3 doctoral programs. Rated at the highest A++ grade by the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, the college has been entrusted with the autonomous status. M.O.P Vaishnav sees the autonomy granted to it as a great responsibility and works diligently on its mission to mold students into well-rounded individuals. It does this through 4 mission goals. First, a laser focus on academic excellence achieved through a robust curriculum and student-friendly teaching learning methods. Second, to build self-reliant individuals. The skilling unit of the college, Kaushal Kendra, offers a host of diploma and certificate courses regularly updated to stay relevant in the marketplace. Third, to provide career opportunities, the placement cell works round the year to connect students with recruiters in the areas of their interest. And finally, to create socially responsible citizens through annual theme-based community service projects that involve all students. M.O.P runs a food scheme, Ahar, through which more than 400 students at 4 schools are served with nutritious millet-based snacks. The college supports 2 schools, the Assumption School and M.O.P Vaishnav School, in many ways. Most recently, to set up a fully equipped computer lab, to expand the availability of urban green spaces and to give back to the community. M.O.P has taken full responsibility for the maintenance of a public park in the vicinity of the college. Besides, M.O.P observes one day every month as No Vehicle Day, when fossil fuel vehicles are not permitted on campus, thus spreading awareness on sustainability. M.O.P's entrepreneurship development activities, its flagship event, the annual 2-day student-run M.O.P Bazaar, sees a footfall of more than 20,000 visitors each year. The M.O.P sports program is a source of great pride for the college. Among its leading lights are Ms. Anita Poldurai, former captain of the Indian basketball team and recipient of the Padma Shri Award, and chess grandmaster, Arjuna awardee, Ms. R. Vaishali. The M.O.P Community Radio Station, a national award-winning station with over 20 years of community service, it is also accessible via its mobile app. The well-known cultural fervour of M.O.P Vaishnav is inculcated through 5 extracurricular clubs that meet regularly for training programs and performances. Shringar is a classical performing arts showcase for alumni performers who are engaged in serious pursuit of their art. The annual M.O.P Yuva Samman Awards are bestowed on young women achievers in fields such as sports, performing arts and entrepreneurship, carrying a cash prize and a citation to motivate them on their journey. The college has found a place in the Asia Book of Records for the highest number of women students completing a UNICEF program on financial literacy. Our college has had the privilege of hosting numerous luminaries, visionaries, experts, celebrities, and thought leaders who have graced our campus with their presence to share invaluable knowledge, raise awareness on critical issues, and inspire us towards greater understanding and purpose. M.O.P Vaishnav has launched an official mascot, Vidya, representing knowledge and growth. Vidya is an embodiment of the quintessential M.O.Pian, not just in her appearance, but also in her intrinsic qualities and innate ethos. She is a leader, a custodian of values and culture, a go-getter, and ultimately a winner.
I request the audience to kindly bear with us while the stage is being set up. The dignitaries are requested to take their seats on the dais. It is our privilege to felicitate our esteemed chief guest, Hon'ble Shri Sanjeev Sanyal. I request our respected principal, Dr. Archana Prasad, to present our chief guest with an E3 certificate and a memento. In a move towards sustainability, this includes a certificate of a tree planted in the name of our esteemed guest. A QR on the certificate can be scanned to check on the progress of the tree as it grows. Thank you, ma'am. I now request Shri S. Sundararaman, Chartered Accountant and Secretary, Bharat Centre for Reforms and Public Policy, to felicitate Shri Sanjeev Sanyal. Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. Archana Prasad, Principal, M.O.P. Vaishnav College for Women, to deliver the welcome address and introduce our esteemed guest.
Good morning, namaste, happy day. Honorable Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. On the dais and co-host of this event, Mr. S. Sundararaman, Chartered Accountant, Secretary, Bharat Centre for Reforms in Public Policy, dignitaries of the dais, eminent citizens of Chennai, invitees, my faculty colleagues, and students of M.O.P, a warm welcome to each one of you. At the outset, I must say, like I did to our chief guest before we came up here, M.O.P has just commenced its journey into the 35th year. And there could have been no better way to commence this journey than by having a special lecture delivered by the Honorable Member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory. Sir, we're extremely fortunate to have you here. Thank you for accepting this invitation. I'm doubly honored by being tasked with the job of introducing Honorable Sanjeev Sanyal, sir, to you. Born in Calcutta and having had his schooling there, he went on to earn his bachelor's degree in economics from Sri Ram College of Commerce, Delhi University. He later went to Oxford University for his master's in economics, where he earned the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship. He started his career in finance. He spent over 2 decades working in the international financial markets, serving in various capacities before laying down his office as Managing Director of Deutsche Bank, Europe's largest bank. What was Deutsche Bank's loss, I believe, was India's gain. He then went on. In February 2017, he was appointed as the Principal Economic Advisor to the Finance Ministry. Under his stewardship, 6 editions of the Economic Survey of India were compiled and released. And today, he is member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. He holds this post since 2022. He was a prime mover, a member of the core team that managed the Indian economy during the unprecedented COVID pandemic. And for this, he was the recipient of the prestigious KPS Menon Memorial Award 2023. Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal dons multifarious hats and does them with elan and grace. He is currently the Chancellor of the Gokhale Institute at Politics and Economics at Pune. He is one of the most successful writers that India has ever produced. He has published a number of books, best-selling books, including Revolutionaries, Land of the Seven Rivers, The Ocean of Churn, India at the Age of Ideas, Iconic Indians, Incredible History of the Indian Ocean. I'm bound to have left out a few. He led the first literature festival of the Delhi University. His book, Revolutionaries, stands on the brink of becoming a web series on Amazon Prime. Sir also works or does a lot of work in the area of experimental archaeology. He oversaw the building of the Kaundinya ship, where they reconstructed an ancient Indian tradition, a stitched technique to build a ship, and he was a part of the Indian crew that sailed from Porbandar to Muscat. And many of us saw the Prime Minister's glorious tribute to this endeavor and this initiative. Sir, your views on Indian history, socialism, judicial system, the H-1B visas have all been very, very interesting to read. But more importantly, for an audience like this, it trains them to hold a counter view with dignity, and most importantly, a counter view that is backed by strong inquiry. This is something that we would like to inculcate in every young MOPian who walks this campus. A few fun facts about our chief guest that many of us did not know. He was a part of the pioneering batch that received a license in paragliding. He has completed an instructor course in kayaking and canoeing. He's the recipient of a black belt in Taekwondo, and he has a passion, he's a passionate map collector. I don't know if that was a fallout of your books or the books were a fallout of that, but nonetheless, again, very, very inspiring for our young girls, because we want them to be multifaceted, well-rounded personalities, and what better way to tell them that than to showcase someone like you. Sir, we are truly fortunate and blessed to have you in our presence today to deliver this lecture on the art of doing economic reforms. A little bit about the competition that was held as a prelude to this event. An invitation was sent out to about 100 colleges, and we received 52 entries from students, and the top 3 entries have been shortlisted. The competition was in the form of an ideathon, where student groups suggested policies. I know we run the risk of carrying coal to Newcastle, sir, but still, I'm sure you want to hear what these young minds have to say and where the future of India is headed. We had an impressive list of 52 entries, from which top 3 presentations or top 4 presentations have been shortlisted for presentation. And more importantly, sir, today they will get an opportunity to present their ideas before you, something that I am looking forward to as much as they are. Thank you so much. I will be failing in my duty if I don't thank Shri Sundararaman. Sir has time and again proven to be a well-wisher, a friend and a guide of our institution, serving us in many capacities, including as our academic council member. Sir, thank you so much. Please keep the list of prolific visitors going to this campus. We are ever ready to host them. Thank you one and all for joining us this morning.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Shri S. Sundararaman to deliver the opening remarks.
On this auspicious occasion of the Guru Purnima, we bow down with due respect to all the teachers present here. The occasion could not have been blessed more beautifully by the presence of the Hon'ble Sanjeev Sanyal. Respected Chief Guest, the dynamic principal, the Archana Prasad Vargal, எப்பயுமே எந்த ஒரு program as part of the organization that we are associated with, a very short message to ma'am. We are always blessed to be associated with the M.O.P. Vaishnav and the entire team. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being there, for always to support us and host the beautiful guest. I just wanted to set a small, what do you call it, prelim before I invite Sanjeev Sanyal ji to address the economic reforms. Maybe it is a long drawn fight between me and Sanjeev Sanyal ji over WhatsApp. I've been requesting him whenever he comes to Chennai for the last at least 2 years. Kindly bless us with your presence. And thankfully, this time, maybe he has shown us some blessings. And thank you so much, sir, for accepting our request and to be here. When I pitched in, obviously, I wanted to learn from a lot of his vision thought process, and more particularly after the big the elections went in the Bengal. But obviously, the much better topic today, the art of making economic reforms. Now, what exactly is an economic reform? Is it merely a passing of a law or an announcement in the parliament or a scheme announcement in the budget? Not nearly. The reform begins when a country accepts that the old system needs to change. It involves correcting the old system, removing unnecessary rules, creating new opportunities, and more importantly, building stronger institutions which supports the same. Obviously, reforms takes time. In more particularly in the last decade, we are able to find out India's economic reforms have changed the lives of every ordinary citizen. The core objective of the government to reach the last man, whether it is the question of digital payments, the financial institution inclusion, startups, the banking reforms, more particularly, much of the credit, whether it is the introduction of the reforms in the non-performing assets, a lot of chartered accountants are here, the insolvency resolution process, the IBC code as such, which the country has now are able to see the simplification of the, we call the bankruptcy process, the brain behind the same, obviously, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal ji. Reforms can make life easier and create new opportunities. They may face criticism at first, but nation building takes time. Yeah, reform should be judged by more particularly 3 questions. Did it create opportunities? Did it strengthen institutions? And did it improve people's lives? That is why today's topic, the art of doing economic reforms, and without taking much of the time, and we have the right speaker here, which is Sanjeev Sanyal ji, for taking us through what are all the various the initiatives which have been taken by the government, and what are the economic reforms which has brought to this government. And I will be failing in my duty as a chartered accountant if I do not bring this fact, because a lot of chartered accountants will also come here. As a practicing CA, sir, this point is very close to me. Shri Sanyal has strongly supported the growth of Indian professional firms. He believes the Indian chartered accountancy firms should grow, work together and compete with the global big 4. For chartered accountants like me, this is an important reform. So if Sanjeev Sanyal's interest to go beyond economics, you could have heard from the respected Principal Ma'am's introduction on his recent voyage on missionless, the rope stitched the ship. He has traveled, which brings us to learn that he is not only an economist, he is also an historian, and more particularly bringing back the past, the civilization, into practice. Thank you so much, sir, and over to you for your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now invite Hon'ble Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, to address the gathering. I request the other dignitaries to kindly occupy their seats off the dais.
How do I change the slides? Thank you. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's okay. Good morning, friends. Morning. Let me begin by thanking M.O.P. Vaishnav College for Women and the Bharat Centre for Reform and Public Policy for inviting me here today. I was here about 3 years odd back, and I had a great interaction. So it is good to be back here again. Thank you for inviting me. Since today's topic is, associated with an institution that talks about reforms in public policy, I thought this would be an appropriate presentation about how is economic policy reforms actually done. Because you all read in newspapers that so-and-so reform got done, this got done, that got done. So it may seem like some sort of a great mysterious thing that people sitting in government buildings are doing. But hopefully, I will be able to convince you at the end of it that we reformers are not as crazy as some of you think, and that there is some thought process that goes into many of the reforms that we are attempting to do. So there's lots of different types of reforms. I'm going to stick with a type of reform called process reforms. These are economic reforms of a particular type. So I need to quickly tell you what on earth these process reforms are. You see, when you hear about reforms, mostly what you hear about is about structural reforms. So you'll read in newspapers, so-and-so structural reform happened. Now, structural reforms are really the very big reforms that happen from time to time. These are called structural because they change the structure of whatever it is that they are trying to reform. So, for example, the GST reform is a structural reform. It's changed the fundamental structure in which indirect taxes were collected in this country. Similarly, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is a change in the structure of how creative destruction and liquidation happened in this country. The original 1991 reforms, they were a structural reform because they got rid of the license permit Raj, old system, introduced a more market-based system. That is a structural reform because that is changed the structure of how our economy was arranged. Now, obviously, these are very big reforms, but they can only happen once in a while. If I keep doing structural reforms all the time, you will get very exhausted. So most of the reforms that reformers actually do are much more nuts and bolts reforms. They are somewhat more boring, of course. So very often you won't have it on the front pages of newspapers. If they are reported at all, they will be there in the 5th page, one column. Very often only people in that little sector care about it. But in fact, the bulk of reforms that happen are this. And they're happening continuously. You may not realize this, but they're happening. Small reforms are happening all the time. These are nuts and bolts reforms. Some regulation, rule number 43B, subsection D, 3 words will be changed for some reason. This is what actually is most of reforms. So while some of you may have a sense of the grand debates in Parliament about some big reform that comes in the newspapers, the real act of doing most of the reforms is actually about doing nuts and bolts reforms. Even the big structural reforms only work because along the way you keep making these small adjustments. So for example, you can have GST, big reform, but in order to actually function, we have to make all these small reforms. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these reforms because very often you don't get a flavor of this, whereas in fact, for us reformers, this is what is really our bread and butter. We do the big reforms, but this is what we do most of the time. Now, oddly enough, if any of you ever go on to study in a management school, you will learn about something called business process re-engineering. Now, oddly enough, you don't hear very much about government process re-engineering. But in fact, most of the pain points that you have with dealing with the state, getting yourself some card, passport, etc., all of the processes that lead to that service being delivered to you is mostly related to this. So bear with me if I give you a little bit of theory and then I will illustrate all of this for you going forward. Now, if you want to do these kinds of reforms, one is to go out there and do those reforms, each department at a time. Now, the problem is that this makes it, unfortunately, that each time you're reinventing the wheel. So there's actually some method to the madness. And to do this, there is a simple schema that I'm going to do. Just remember it. You don't have, I will come back to it. The first is obviously to identify something that you think is inefficient. It's inefficient because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, whatever it is you think why it needs a reform. Then you have to do something called documentation of the as-is process. Now this is a very important thing. This is the step where you basically lay out whatever that process it is that you are trying to reform, simply lay it out as it exists today. So for example, if you're doing institutional reform, you can lay out the architecture of the institutions that you want to look at. Or if it's a process, you literally go step by step and see how it works today. Very often, this is a real problem in the government because there will be people who have worked in that sector for a long time and they assume that they actually know how the process works. But now that I've done hundreds of these reforms, one of the things I've noticed is that even somebody who's worked in a sector for as much as 10 years may sometimes not understand the entire process. In fact, this is the source of the problem. Because large systems, not just the bureaucracy, but any large system, they'll even be perhaps true of your university, everybody is in a little box. They don't actually understand what happens before them and after them. So as is, process mapping is very, very important. Then comes the next interesting step. Now that you've worked out the process, you begin to identify here exactly what the issue is. Now, why is this an important thing? You see, and I will talk to you a little bit about the 80-20 rule. Most of the time, 80% of the problem, sometimes 90% of the problem is due to 20 to 10% of the process. Why is this an important and useful insight? Because it basically means that in order to get the system going, you don't need to do complicated and disruptive structural reforms. Most of the time, you can actually make the system work by just changing 10 to 20% of the system. That is why process reforms are so powerful. You actually manage to do most of the change with very little effort. Too many times, everybody wants a clean slate and wants to do something completely new. But in fact, you are dealing with a running system. It's like trying to fix a car while you are still driving it. And if you try to change the whole car, you won't be able to do it. So this is why it's important, the 80-20 rule. Then obviously the next step is to actually do the changes, that whatever it is you identified. And then comes the very last part of the process, which is to monitor whether or not whatever change you wanted to achieve through the reform has actually happened, feedback loop, and very important in governments, whether or not you've had an unintended consequence. Now, much of this, by the way, can be done also in companies or any large systems. Most of these same rules will apply, but in the specific case of governments, the feedback loop and unintended consequences are very, very important because governments are very often difficult places for taking feedback. There are many reasons for this. Sometimes it's because of political pressures, but there is one very simple human reason why this happens. Reforms take time, civil servants get shuffled. The person who did the change may have moved on, the next person simply does not know what has happened. So there are many reasons why this doesn't happen. Similarly, you make a change here, you achieve the ends, but somewhere else in the system, something unintended happens as a result. Now, in a company, in a small system, it's more easy to figure this out. But in a large system, this is a very big important thing. I'll give you one example. We have over the last decade dramatically introduced solar power generation. Now you may see that, this is a good thing, and yes, it is a good thing because solar power is a good thing and it doesn't create CO2, etc. But you know what has happened as a result? The problem is now our grids have all become unstable. Why? Because during the daylight hours, lots of electricity is produced. But in the evening, when all of you will go home and switch on your air conditioning, lights, etc., there is a massive spike in electricity usage in exactly the same time that the solar power actually switches off because the sun goes down. So, although we are now producing lots and lots more excess energy, just when you need it, you don't get it. So, you now have to invest heavily into storage and other things as well. But meanwhile, what is happening is that at midday, there are many days in which you will be surprised to hear that the national grid actually refuses to take power. We have so much excess power. It's almost free. You'll get a unit of power at 1 rupee or something like that. And then in the same day, in the evening, it will spike up to over 10 rupees. In fact, there's a limit at 10 rupees, so it doesn't go over. But if we had an open system, it would probably go to 12, 13 rupees. So imagine, a 13 times increase spike in energy prices in the same day. So, we will fix it, of course, but I'm just pointing out to you how unintended consequences happen. Okay. Now, here is, just so that you know this, the importance of process mapping, and I'm talking about this a little more. Because I'm going to give you examples of all of this, just bear with me. But one of the reasons this is very important is that you see, whenever governments are under pressure to improve some system, what do? They'll tell you, we are digitizing this system. Now, if you digitize the existing system, sometimes you get some benefit, but in fact, a lot of the time, the old system being digitized does not really improve anything. Because the old system was designed from a pre-digital system. Now you have digitized it. Not much benefit. In fact, sometimes, as I will show you shortly, it may actually worsen the situation. So when you do a change, please map out the process before you do a basic change, because otherwise you may actually not get all the benefits. So this is very important. Oops, some reason it's got stuck. If you can flick to the next slide, please. Yeah. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the different kinds. Don't have to memorize this, but these are the kinds of reforms you have. I will give you some illustrations. I have identified 7 types. There might be an 8th type. If you find one, I'll add it here. But here are the kinds of process reforms we usually deal with. The first and most obvious kinds and simplest kinds of process reforms is to revisit lists and precedents that are defaults of any system. So any large system, you can write down all the rules. Even this college, the way it actually functions is because of all the informal rules, precedents, etc., that are the defaults of how human behavior and interaction happens. This is not written down anywhere. It is just how it happens. It has evolved there. Somebody somewhere along the way may have changed it and devised it, but you end up with this kind of a system. So you will end up with these lists. Nobody knows why these lists or precedents exist, but they do. But they heavily influence the way any large system works. I'll give you an example. When I was in finance ministry, every year we used to invite, and they still do, a group of experts from different fields. They may come from industry, from civil society, from different parts of aspects of the economy. They come and meet the finance minister and they give suggestions. Nothing wrong with that. And when I was principal economic advisor, it was my job to call these people and invite them. So in different days, you will see this will happen even this year. You will see. So what happens in these is that you inherit a list of people who were called over the last few years. So when I looked at this list and went through it, there were of course well-known people who are invited from different aspects of Indian society. But it was quite interesting that that list had not been revised for a very long time. So many members of that list were no longer even alive, and yet that list had not been revised. And many prominent people who had emerged in recent years had not got added to it. So something as simple as that doesn't get done. And by the way, the same thing happens even with something as important as your list of national monuments. Okay, so you have a list of nationally protected monuments under AMSAR. India, by the way, has some 3,650 odd national monuments. Now the question is, where did we end up with this list? How did we get this list? Why are there these 3,600 odd monuments and not some other list? It turns out, when I looked at it, this is in 2002 or so, it turns out that some 2/3 of this was simply inherited from the British in 1947. They had a list of nationally protected monuments which I had in colonial period, we got them. And most of the other 1/3 was inherited from the princely states. So effectively the entire list was basically made up of some monuments which we inherited from the colonial period. Now few more monuments were added along the way, but no monument was removed. So when in 2022 I looked at this list, I discovered something quite interesting. First of all, there were several dozen monuments that had gone missing. The Archaeological Survey of India had no idea where these monuments actually were. So much so that they had given a reply in Parliament that they did not where it was. So that was the first point, and they were still there in the National Monument list. Next, the list was full of colonial era monuments that were clearly not of national importance, which included loads of graves of obscure colonial era officials like PWD engineers and so on. So I'm not talking about, Victoria Memorial or Kolkata or something, which may be a big thing. At least it's aesthetically good looking, something important. So I'm okay with preserving that. I'm talking about small graves, smaller than the stage, in places like Nagaland. In fact, in Nagaland, there are 4 national monuments. 3 of them are graves of obscure officials who nobody knows who they are. They were killed about 100 odd years ago by local tribesmen for some dispute or the other. One would think that maybe one could have monuments to those tribesmen because one could perhaps call them freedom fighters. I don't know. But certainly no case for preserving these small graves where, incidentally, all the rules and regulations that apply to the Taj Mahal also apply to them. Because there's the same set of rules for national monuments. So the same rules that apply to the Taj Mahal apply to these tiny graves in the middle of nowhere, which includes, by the way, a 100 plus 200 meter radius where there is severely regulated. So you have to actually, if you want to make changes even inside your house, you have to go to the Archaeological Survey of India and, make a petition, potentially encourage them in other ways in order to get your permission. So like this, I found many other places even in the city of Delhi. So let me tell you one story about the statue of John Nicholson. Now, how many of you even know who John Nicholson is? Does anybody here know who John Nicholson is? Literally nobody. So let me tell you who he is. So you'll all know that there was a great revolt in 1857-58. Yeah. Now during one of the places that big revolt happened was the walled city, the old city of Delhi, Shah Jahanabad. Now in 1858, after the revolt, the city was taken back by the British and sacked. And the British Brigadier General who did it was John Nicholson. Now John Nicholson was cruel even by the standards of his time. He basically took back the city and he carried out a massive massacre, not just of the rebels, but even of general civilian population. And even at that time, people thought that he was a bit excessive. Anyway, he was a hero to the British. And so in time, they raised a statue to John Nicholson in front of Kashmiri Gate. So Kashmiri Gate, those of you who've been to Delhi, is one of the gates of the old city of Delhi. So now, we became independent in 1947. So, as I told you, the list became a part of the list of national monuments. This included the statue of John Nicholson in front of Kashmiri Gate. Now, nobody bothered to remove it. Till in 1958, John Nicholson's hometown in Northern Ireland wrote a letter to the government of India saying that presumably you no longer have use for this statue. Can you give it to us? Because we will celebrate John Nicholson. So the government of the time took down the statue, wrapped it in bubble wrap, I assume, and sent it off to Northern Ireland, where in the middle of his hometown it's been put up, and I assume every year they commemorate him or whatever. So the John Nicholson statue is now in Northern Ireland. There's only one problem. The problem is that the statue was not delisted from the list of national monuments. So therefore, the empty spot on which it used to stand continued to be a national monument. And the 300-meter radius around it in Kashmiri Gate, which is one of the most densely populated places in Delhi, continued to be regulated by the Archaeological Survey of India. And if you happen to have a house there, you had to go to Archaeological Survey of India, get harassed for months, if not years, perhaps have to pay a small bribe to the local official to get permission to even make small changes to your house. Why? Because you are in the 300-meter radius of a national monument. So finally, when I wrote about this in the newspaper and mocked the officials, they delisted it. So in December 2024, the statue of John Nicholson was finally delisted from the list of national monuments. But his grave, which is just half a kilometer away, is still a national monument. So I am now working on that one. Now that is just type 1. I can give you examples like this of the others. Type 2, which I will come to, administrative streamlining. Here there is an administrative process and you need to change that process in some fashion. Then you have to change the rules and regulations. So under a given law, the department has certain rules and regulations. So sometimes you have to change those rules and regulations. Then sometimes you have to go back to Parliament. So this is where very often the very big changes happen, but sometimes amendments happen which are also process reforms and small changes. So those are legislative changes. Sometimes you have to add capacity in the government. So for example, just like in a pipeline or in a highway, you can have a lot of width in the capacity and then at one point it is narrow and then widens out again. Now the entire capacity of the pipeline is ultimately just the narrowest point, right? So sometimes you have to widen out that narrowest point. So type 5 is adding state capacity at some choke point. Sometimes it is about removing state and state-enabled monopoly. So sometimes you add capacity, sometimes you have to remove it. So for example, you may be surprised to know that till the year 2020, Google Maps was actually technically illegal in India. So all of you were using Google Maps, all were doing something illegal. Because maps in India was the monopoly of a body called the Survey of India. It's only in 2020 that finally we managed to get rid of that monopoly. But sometimes those state monopolies are given to other parties which are outside of government, which are given certain powers. For example, professional bodies. You were mentioning, sir, the Chartered Accountants Institute. That's a professional body. It's not a part of the government, but it is given certain monopoly, and that monopoly can sometimes be misused. And I'll give you one example of it. I have been, in recent years, trying to advocate that we need to have larger Indian chartered accountancy, but also consultancy bodies from of Indian origin, rather than this big four domination that you have everywhere. Now, there are many reasons for this. One of the major reasons, ironically, is that our own Chartered Accountants Institute actually introduces rules that makes it impossible for Indian consultancies, chartered accountancies, etc., to create brands for themselves. So, I have been to many conferences where right behind me it will say Ernst & Young has sponsored it, Deloitte, whatever, PwC, etc. But I have never been to one in which our own companies have sponsored it. Now, is this because we don't have any firm at all who can build a brand? Actually, that is not the case. The reason they cannot do it is because our own chartered accountancy rules used to state, and I think that's now being changed, that you could not do any form of advertising or brand building. So much so that you could not actually write your name of your firm in anything more than font size 14, right? Now just imagine how ridiculous it is. Font size 14. So I have had absurd situations that I have gone to an event where there is a very eminent chartered accountant sitting next to me, and his name is there, and his name of his firm is written in very small font. So I asked him, why is it this ridiculously small? Nobody in the audience can read it. He said, sir, if I do it, I will get in trouble in the Chartered Accountants Institute. So this is how we shoot ourselves in the foot. And then, of course, there is the rationalization of institutional architecture of government. So any large system will, over time, accumulate all kinds of old bodies. Some of them may have made sense, but over time they have become outdated and irrelevant. You need to close them, you need to transfer them and merge them with something. You have to do something about it. This is, again, as I said, not only true of government, it's true of any large organization. It will be true of universities, it will be true of large companies and so on. This kind of situation happens all the time, and we need to begin to clean them up. Now what I'm going to do is give you some examples of this, so that in detail. Now, this is about voluntary liquidation of companies. So, every year in any country there are new companies that come and old companies that are written off. Yeah, they go out. Now, some small part of them happened because they went bankrupt or insolvent or something, and so some bad thing happened to them, they had to be shut down. But in any country, something like 80-90% of the companies that shut down in any year happen purely because of voluntary reasons. So, for example, some businessman was running a small company, he's now become old, his kids are not interested in running that company, so he decides to shut it down. Common phenomena. Similarly, a special purpose vehicle is created by a company for some purpose. That purpose has now been completed, you want to shut it down. Now, there is nobody objecting to the actual shutting down of this company. And yet, in India, shutting down a company was a very, very difficult task till just a few years ago. Has anyone here in front, particularly you have lots of people from business, have you any of you attempted to shut down a company voluntarily in this country? Yeah, here is some people here. So you will know how painful it used to be. It used to take years to shut down a company, even though everybody agrees that it should be shut down. Nobody is objecting to it, and yet it would take years. And remember, keeping a company going is not a fun thing. You still have to give its audits, annual, this thing, do meetings, all kinds. So as long as it is alive, it's a living being, and you have to So, some years ago, I began to look into this. So, as I said, there are two methods of shutting down companies in India. The main method of doing this is through something called Section 248(2) of the Companies Act 2013. Students, I'm sorry, but most of life is about dragging out such detail. Okay, so Section 248(2) of the Companies Act 2013 is most companies that are shut down are under this. There is also a provision under IBC that is meant for large companies, but bulk of companies are shut down through this. Now, as I said, these are companies with no pending litigations, everything has been extinguished, its assets, everything is done. And yet, when I began to look into this some years ago in 2021-22, I discovered that there were 28,536 pending cases. Nearly 10% of them had been pending for more than 1,000 days. And 54% were pending for more than 1 year. So companies were languishing for years and not being able to shut down, even though everybody agreed it had to shut down. Nobody was disagreeing with it. So on average, roughly speaking, about 500 days it took to shut down a company in this country. Okay? This is average. As I said, there were some running for more than 1,000 days. So what did we do? I told you, as is mapping. So we began to map it out. So how do you shut down a company under this act? Well, first thing you have to do is convene a meeting, approve, the board meeting will then approve the closure of bank accounts, pay off the pending liabilities and so on. All standard stuff. Then the company was supposed to file something called an STK2 form with respect to the registrar of companies with whatever fees had to be paid. Then third, the directors had to furnish a declaration in electronic form stating that the company does not have any dues towards any government department. This was certified by a chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary and so on. And then the STK form began to be accompanied by a copy of the resolution, and you basically now put it in. So now, after doing all of this, the counter starts. So all of this has been done. Now the counter starts. You send it to the Registrar of Companies and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. The Registrar of Companies' job is essentially to do the following thing. To put up an advertisement in the official website of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, in the official gazette, and also to put up just the name of the company in a newspaper, one in English and one in any Indian language paper, stating that this company is shutting down. So in case there was somebody who had some dues from that company, they can come and raise some objection. Okay? This was how it was done, and then after some time, the idea was, if nobody came up with an objection, the company was be wound down. This is the process. Now, what really used to happen is that the companies, of course, do their own meetings, board, etc., done quickly. They filled out the form, they sent it. Now, all that the registrar of company has to do is to actually simply put out an advertisement saying that this company wants to shut down. This used to take years. The simple act of putting out the advertisement. Why? Well, there were in none of the rules there was any strict timelines for the ROC to follow. They would keep randomly asking for all kinds of documents. There was no standard format. And as we found out, what they would do is there was a standard rate that you basically had to pay some broker in order to actually get your work done. I, in fact, managed to find the rate card for getting this done. And of course, the ROCs would also ask for external departments like Income Tax Department to give you all kinds of NOCs. So all of this took all this time, whereas in fact, it should take no time at all. So what did we do? So what we did is we created something called CPACE, which is Centralized Processing for Accelerated Corporate Exit. So basically what happened is we created a website and we broke down the old system completely. So what you do is, supposing I'm a company who wants to shut down, take all your paperwork, put it into the system. Now the system automatically sends out emails to relevant departments asking them, do you have no objection to this? If they don't get back within a specified time, the system generates a list on its own and gives it to the ROC to put up as advertisement. Now at this stage, the ROC can object. But in fact, they have to do it in writing. So if they say so-and-so company shouldn't shut down, they should give in writing why this company cannot be shut down. And of course, what happens is nobody wants to give anything in writing. So net result, what has happened is that the entire list is now going into the advertisement. Within 30 days, the thing comes out and these companies are being shut down. May sound like an utterly boring thing to do, but look at the dramatic impact. What used to take on average almost 500 days, now takes only 60 days. This is ease of doing business. This is an 88% reduction in the time in the ease of exit. Okay? That's why I told you, process reforms are painful. They have to document, you have to go into the details. There'll be usually the existing people who are running it, who are benefiting from the current system, will always oppose you. But if you persist, you get these very dramatic changes that you can make. And this is a good application of what I said was the 80-20 rule. I didn't have to change everything. I didn't change any law notice. I didn't even change the regulations. I just changed the administrative process. Now, this can also be done for other forms of exit. I told you there was another way of shutting down a company through IBC. This is only used by very, very big companies. Again here, this used to take for ages. So for example, in December 2021, there were 115 cases had been filed. Out of the total, final reports had been received for 49% of the cases, but the final order of dissolution had only been passed for 25% of the cases. So 75% of the cases were languishing. And of the ongoing cases, 35 had been running for more than 2 years and 18% had been running for 1 to 2 years. So look at how much delays are generally happening for no reason at all. Again, we did an as-is mapping. And what did we discover? We discovered that most of the delay, if you used this IBC approach to shutting down a company, happened because you had to go and get all manner of no objection certificates from tax department, labor department, and so on. Now the bizarre thing was that in fact the law did not even require you to get the NOCs. It was not required. And yet the officials who ran the system insisted on it. So what did we have to do? There were many other things as well. But because there were delays in getting the NOCs and there was no standard format, every NCLT court came up with its own format about how to do this. So what did we do? We standardized it. First of all, the Insolvency Board of India, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, in November 2020 actually came up with a clarification which stated, it is hereby clarified that the provisions of the code and regulations of Section 178 of Income Tax Act 1971 and insolvency professionals handling voluntary liquidations, it is not required to seek any NOC from Income Tax Department for compliance of the said process. So you actually had to write it out that you don't need it. Now in most countries, if you didn't write it out, you wouldn't ask for it. We have the opposite problem here. If you don't write it out, they will ask you for it. So we clarified clearly, you don't need it. Then what we did, we created something called Form H. You probably have to use it, sir. This is the thing. It's a standard format. You just tick your way down it. Once you have ticked all the boxes, it is said that the process is complete. No official can ask you for, oh, but you forgot to do something. No. Once this is complete, it's complete. And again, look at the impact. Dramatic improvement in the percentage of cases under voluntary liquidation. It used to be, 44% final report had been submitted, now 78%. Earlier, 22% had been closed, now 59%. Dramatic speeding up of the process. It's not ideal still. I think it can still be improved. But you can see how these small changes, somebody goes in there, finds out what it is that is clogging the system and changes it. That is what the boring business of doing reforms really looks like. But it is important. This is what makes the system efficient, and in not too much time from now, those sitting in the back rows, I'm sorry to tell you, if you want to get into policy making, you have to be ready to do these kinds of things. So please learn this. Very, very important. Now I'm going to give you another example of a different kind of process reform. This relates to something called the Investor Education and Protection Fund. Now, how many in this audience even know what it is? Okay, a small number of, at least in the front, there are about 6-7 people who know what it is. Just so that you know, this is where basically unclaimed shares go to die. So supposing your grandaunt suddenly left you 50 crores of shares of some successful company, and you're feeling very happy about this, then let me tell you that first of all, the shares will first go to this fund, and then it is your problem to get it out of this fund. Only then you can celebrate. And the chances are, till we did these reforms recently, the chances were that you would probably meet your grandaunt in the afterlife before you got the money. In fact, most people, the official numbers said it took 3 years to get the money out, but in fact, the bulk of the people simply gave up. So when I began to look into this issue in late 2024, early 25, I discovered that if you included the dividends accrued, etc., almost 1 lakh crore of money was stuck in this fund. Okay, they were the money belonging to citizens. The fund was created, in fact, to give the money back. But in fact, taking out money from the fund was very difficult. Those of you who have tried it will remember this. In fact, effectively, you had to go and bribe some broker with 20% of the value, and they would find some way of taking out the money. This was what was going on when we began to look into this issue. Again, what is the first step? Map the process. And what did we discover? That in order to get your money back, you had to actually do 25 separate steps. And these separate 25 steps were not even in one place. They were spread over 3 different portals. So first you had to put it into one portal to ask for permission to get the money. Then once you got the permission and approvals, you had to go to a second portal to actually get your shares back. And then when you got the shares back, you had to go to a third portal in order to get your dividends back. These portals did not talk to each other. And if in the process of doing this, if there was a mistake, in the 24th step, you had to go back to step number 1. Which tells you that snakes and ladders in an Indian game. Now, I have long thought that maybe M.O.P. Vaishnav College can try and find out who designed this process and nominate them for next year's Economics Nobel Prize. Now, I'll take you, do you really want me to read you all the 25 steps? There are 25 steps. Okay, let me just at least show you. These are the steps, those you care. For the first website, approval process. You can see this is all very painful stuff. More of the steps to step 13. Then transfer of shares from step 14 onwards goes down. Then for dividend transfer all the way to step 25. If you wanted to get your entire money back, this is the how much effort you had to put in. And as I told you, make a mistake, go back to the beginning. So, as you can see, we mapped out the entire process. Having mapped it out, well, it was obvious what we needed to do. Among the many things that we discovered was the first obvious thing. They were on 3 separate portals. All you needed to do, first of all, was to unify them. Because many of the mistakes that used to happen is the manual entry of data that didn't go from one to the other. And then when you manually entered it, the people running the second portal had to go and verify from the people of the first portal whether correct data had been uploaded. Completely simple thing. All we did was use APIs to get these things to become seamless. Just talk to each other. So it became one portal, one process. Didn't have. Now why? Remember I told you, don't take an old process and simply lay on digitization. It'll actually make it more complicated. The old process before digitization was actually simpler. But at least the same file would move up. Here you took a file, got everything, uploaded it, pulled it out again. This was what was going on. So first thing, unify all those. Just by doing it, I managed to, and did some other simplification. So wherever you had sequential processes, I made them parallel. Basically, we took 25 down to 14, just by doing this. And then we simplified a few things else. Removed the manual parts, 4 steps went down, various things happened parallelly, so all these kinds of solutions happened. Here is what happened as a result of this change. Look at it. So we were doing something like 900 odd approvals a month till August of last year. We introduced this system in end September of 25, and look at how it begins to go up. In October, it jumps up to 3,600 cases, approvals, jumps then to 7,500, jumps further to 11,400, and the last month of data that we have is for March, it goes up to 14,500 cases in 1 month by just simplifying this process. So much so that we are now getting rid of the backlog. And in the next few months, we will actually have cleared up the backlog entirely. And in fact, this number will go down because we are not getting so many cases coming at the same speed. So we are actually waiting for you. So if your grandaunt did give you a lot of money and you hadn't been able to get it back, this is your time in the sun. Same data in a slightly different way. That was the number of approvals. This is by number of shares transferred. And you can see what was going on till last April, September. And now, October to March, we are doing a multiple of the number of shares transferred. Same data, just by number of shares. So, hopefully by now you have been convinced about how process reforms are done, how to think about problem solving, identifying the blockages, making the changes, and trying to get that system to work. Now, one of the things is that as a result of now having done literally hundreds of these changes, there are some things that I have learnt about process reforms and about the art of making rules themselves. See, you have to know one important thing about the world, which is that the world is intrinsically unpredictable. If you hang around long enough, something will happen that you could not have predicted. You've seen it in the last few years. There was no way in January 2020 I could have predicted that the next 2 years would be impacted by some virus called COVID-19 emanating from Wuhan, China, that was going to upturn our entire lives. Completely unpredictable thing. In the last few months, we have had a war in Iran. Before that, we had a tariff issue, and so on and so forth. The world is continuously being buffeted by shocks. So sitting here, the world can go into multiple different pathways, and so it is impossible to judge where it will go. Why is this an important insight? It is an insight because it leads to the Nobel Prize winning research of somebody called Oliver Hart. Oliver Hart made something called the incomplete contract theory. So basically what he said, that it is not possible to create a contract between two people, and by the way, this includes laws and regulations, because that's a contract between the state and the citizen. So there is no such thing as a law or a contract that is complete, that can take care of every possible future outcome that can happen. If you attempted to create a law that was able to deal with every possible future outcome, that law would be infinitely long and would very quickly become impossible to use, which leads to something called the 99-1 problem. The 99-1 problem is this, that if you keep a law or running or a regulation running for a while, and you keep adjusting the laws in order to accommodate exceptions, exemptions, misuse and so on, you will end up after a while where 99% of the laws are dealing with 1% of the exceptions, exemptions and the misuses. So 99% of the people who are perfectly normal people will be forced to comply with this huge gamut of laws which are actually doesn't apply to them at all. And yet they have to apply for it because of that 1%. What is the insight here? That when you create laws, it is best not to attempt to be comprehensive. Make the laws simple. If it deals with 99% of the situation, then, or 99.1 if you prefer, whatever you think is a reasonable cutoff, keep the laws to deal with those situations that are normally going to happen. For the exceptions, exemptions and the cases of non-compliance, what you should do is to allow other systems to deal with it, not the law. So this is where you have, for example, if it's something criminal or misuse is happening, let the courts deal with it. If there is an exceptional situation where you need to deal with an exception, then let the ombudsman deal with it. Do not ask the law to deal with it, because if you create eternally complex laws, what you will happen is that these laws will become so complicated, not only are they burdening the compliant, they are also in turn creating new wrinkles in the system that will be misused, for which there will be exceptions and so on and so forth. So one of the golden rules of lawmaking is be very suspicious of anybody who comes and tells you that they have created the perfect law that can deal with every situation, because there is no such thing. So things to keep in mind while doing reforms, creating laws, even running large systems like universities or large companies. Do not do blanket application of digital technology. It is not a substitute for process reform. In fact, sometimes the old process, if it is unreformed and you put it into a digital format, may actually become worse. Second, do not search for the gold standard and mindless application of best practice. One major problem of government is mindlessly something will be called best practice and they apply everywhere. It doesn't deal with every situation. You have to apply your mind to that situation. Do not create gold standards, which basically is short-term, is a euphemism that bureaucracies use for making very complicated laws that they claim can take care of every situation. Gold standard law is a simple law. It's not a law that takes care of everything. So, what are the things we should do? And what are the different kinds of new kinds of reforms that I am now advocating? So far I've talked about reforms that I have already managed to do. And I only gave you examples of things that I have personally worked on. But of course, there are many other reformers in the system who are doing other reforms. But I'm now going to talk about a reform that I want to now begin to push for, which is the Transparency of Rules Act. What is this reform? See, one of the things that I have come to believe after having now worked in the government for almost a decade is that in fact, one of the big problems with India is not that Indians are somehow natural lawbreakers. That is what everybody thinks it is. The real problem in India is not that we are somehow lawless. After all, when we go to another country, we behave perfectly well. Even our driving improves. So what is it that causes us to feel lawless in the country? The reason is a very simple one, that in fact, most citizens of India do not know what the rules, regulations and laws are. That is the fundamental reason. And why don't we know what the laws are? Because in fact, it is extremely difficult to find out what the rules are. Because it's not in one place. I'm quite certain if I ask you to tell me exactly what the fine is for maybe driving on the wrong side of the road in Chennai or in Tamil Nadu generally, you will not be able to tell me by Googling it up. Just try. You will not be able to know, is the cop supposed to take your license or not? Nowhere it's written. How much money is he supposed to charge you for doing this? What is the procedure? Not written anywhere. This is where a lot of the rent-seeking harassment happens. Similarly, in many other aspects, you will discover that you do not know what the rule is. You think you have followed the rule. When you actually turn up in dealing with the government, you will be told, sorry, you have not filled form J1 and complied with rule 78 subsection D. Now, how do I know where the section D is and what is it? So this is a major problem that you have. And yet, the entire basis of all legal systems, including India, is that an ignorance of the law is not a defense. Right? So you cannot say, sorry, I didn't know what the law is. The citizen is supposed to know. But my argument against this is, yes, I will know the law, but I should have a fighting chance of finding out what it is. How do I find out what it is? Impossible to know. So, I am arguing for something called the Transparency of Rules Act, which will say the following, that effectively, what this law will do is, first of all laws, rules, regulations, forms and other citizen-facing requirements shall be easily acceptable in a dedicated centralized portal and on the websites of the relevant department or agency. They have to put it up. If they have not put it up, that rule or regulation, it will be deemed not to apply. And if they put something wrong down, then that law will apply till they have changed it. So for example, if the transport ministry by mistake writes that in order to get a driving license, I have to learn Bharatnatyam, and I have learned Bharatnatyam, then you have to give me my license. It's your problem to tell me what the law is. And it's only when you've changed the rule, then you can ask me to learn how to drive a car. Otherwise, Bharatnatyam. Similarly, the website where these laws and rules will be changed will have to be time-stamped. Why is this important? Because then retrospectively rules cannot be changed. I will know that at 9 o'clock on July 25th, 2026, this rule applied to me. At 10 o'clock, the rule was changed. But at 9 o'clock, I did something that violates that 10 o'clock rule. I cannot be held responsible. There was no way for me to know what the future rule would be. So therefore, it has to be time-stamped. And the third, and very important, is that these rules have to be presented to me as a citizen in one form, not as a series of circulars. How am I to know which circular is the latest one? How do I know? So, if I go to the website, I should be able to do this. Now, this is not a complicated thing to do. Go and look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia tells you what the rules are. It also allows you to go and look at the history. But it doesn't ask me to look through the entire history to figure out what the current position is. So, the current position should be told to me clearly, and as I said, it is time-stamped, So you can't change it suddenly. I can go back and look at what the past law was as well. And in this way, we will remove a very major source of uncertainty in how our governance is done, a major source of harassment, and a major source of rent seeking. This is a very important reform that we need to do. I have been advocating it, and I hope I've convinced people in this audience that this is a law that needs to be backed. I'll give you an example of something we have already done in these directions, something called the RBI's Master Circulars. Till 2025, the RBI used to have something like, I don't know, something more than 9,000 circulars. Many of them contradicted themselves. Sir, you deal with FEMA and all that, you will know this. So there were 9,000 plus such circulars, some of them dating back to 1944. Nobody knew which of these applied and which of them didn't because you hadn't scrapped them. This led to, as you can imagine, confusion, harassment, and many other things. Now, as of November 28, 25, the RBI announced a final issuance of 244 master circulars, of which basically the 9,446 circulars that you used to deal with, 3,809 have now been subsumed into these master circulars. So all those laws have now exist, and as a result, 5,673 have been repealed as obsolete. So as a citizen, you now know that those 3,809 are the ones you're supposed to follow, and those are now nicely and neatly given to you in the form of 244 master directions. Clearly tells you, supposing you're dealing with banking, then go here. If you're dealing with foreign exchange, go there, and so on and so forth. And once a year or thereabouts, they are going to carry on. Now, one point I want to make. They did not change any rules here. It's the same rules. All they have done is gotten rid of the garbage, told you what the rules are, and presented to you in a clear format. It's as is. And the result of this is dramatically lowering all the unnecessary harassment, conflict, confusion that used to be there. So this is an example of the transparency of rules that I have been advocating. So here are some conclusions before I stop, and maybe you can do some Q&A. The process reforms, as I said, are an important part of policy and governing toolkit. Most of the time, they require small, targeted, iterative changes. I'm saying this because everybody loves to have these big, grand reforms. Those are disruptive, they're difficult to do, but the point is, they're mostly not needed. Once in a while you need them. Yes, you couldn't have gone from the old tax system to the GST system without one big leap. So sometimes you do need structural reforms, but most of the time actually you need to do small iterative changes. They're less disruptive. Supposing a mistake happens, they're easy to unwind and do again, and so on and so forth. Second, we need academia here. I'm in an academic institution. I need you to help me document the large numbers of reforms that happen, because if we do not document it in a nice academic way, we cannot teach it. The business changes and re-engineering that happen tend to be made into nice case studies that are taught in management schools. This is hugely beneficial to those who want to become managers. Unfortunately, the same thing is not done in public administration at all. So those who are studying public administration or economics, it is very unlikely that you will be taught how to do a reform. You'll basically turn up somewhere. If you become a public administration person, you will certainly turn up and be asked to make reforms, and you will have no idea how to do it, because nobody has documented these changes. So please, academia, please help me make changes. Maybe even the chartered accountants and businessmen here, those who have capabilities, please write down where the changes, what changes happened, did it help, what happened as a result. And then, very importantly, teach it to the next generation. They shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel the way I had to do it. So that basically brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful session on process reforms, their formation, and different types of with different types of examples. The case studies you shared were especially insightful and helped bring these concepts to life. This session has deepened our understanding and inspired us to think critically about the role each one of us can play in shaping India's future. We will now begin the question and answer session. We have a few questions submitted by our students which I will be posing on their behalf. I request the student to stand in their place while the question is being read out. The first question is asked by Sarayu V, 2nd MA Public Policy. What is one question every policy maker should ask before introducing an economic reform?
So, the most important thing, as I said, obviously there are so many different types of reforms that's difficult to put a generic answer to that. But the point that they need to first make is, what is the cost and benefit of doing whatever it is you are trying to do? So, if you are making, let's say, changing a particular rule, then one, who are the people who will benefit, in what way, but very important to also figure out who will lose. This is important to know, not merely because you are doing a cost-benefit analysis, because in the end, doing a reform is at some place a very political economy question. And even if you discover that 99% of people benefit and 1% of people actually get hurt from it, very often the 1% of people may be very well organized amongst themselves, and very often they may be inside the system. They may in fact be the very people you are asking to implement your reforms. So to know the people who were going to be the losers from your change is very, very important. Sometimes, of course, there may be genuine cases as well. Similarly, you need to have some sense of the unintended consequences of what you're going to do. So this is again something that you need to be clear about. Why? Because after you have, let's say you agree, after doing all the thing that you're going to do this reform, it is very important that after a while, after implementing the reform, you go back and check whether your idea of what this change will have done, who would be the winners, the losers, and so on, was your premise actually correct? Sometimes it will be, and hopefully if you're a good reformer and you've done lots of them, you'll begin to generate a sense of them. But as I said, I gave you an example of the solar thing, which is a good thing, but then on the other side, it is making our system much more wobbly and making the grid unstable. So you have to begin to think about all these kinds of issues and doing continuous feedback loops as you make progress. This is something that you need to also do. Hope I answered your question. Thank you. Next one.
Thank you, sir. Coming up next is the question posed by Srimati S from 2nd MA Public Policy. Tamil Nadu has a strong social welfare program. How can the state balance welfare with long-term economic growth through policy reforms?
Where are you? Anyway, okay, hi. Since I belong to the central government, I'm usually careful about pronouncing anything on a state government because of separation of power. So I will speak in general terms about this issue. It's a very simple thing that you as citizens need to understand. Money does not grow on trees. This is a common sense point. So there is a trade-off between trying to provide support to groups that you do need to support. In any society, there will be people who will fall through the cracks. There will be activities you want to support that you think are beneficial in the long run or even in the short run. Whatever, we are a democratic society, so we have to make a judgment that this is a good thing to do and we have to spend money on it. Yeah. Now, when you do that, do remember that in exchange for this, you are running up debt. Even if you are not running up debt, you are using up taxpayers' money that could have been used to do some other activity. So there is an opportunity cost to it. So when you are doing that, each society needs to judge that is this a sensible thing to be doing? Because in the end, do remember that you and your descendants will have to pay back that debt. It's not disappearing. You may have to repay it and actually pay it back in taxes, or you may have to repay it back in inflation, which is basically another form of taxation. So if you don't want future taxation or you don't want future inflation, then you may want to look at whether or not the welfare or any other kind of spending you're doing, it could be non-welfare spending as well, is it a sensible place to be spending your hard-earned money of today and future streams of income as well. This is why you need societies to have a mature and open discussion about these issues. Sadly, these issues tend to get politicized, but then it is the job of the intellectual class of every society to stand up and make that point at whichever level of society needed. Sometimes it's at the central level, sometimes state level. It can also be, by the way, at the municipal level. I hope I answered your question. Yeah, thank you.
Third, we have Tanishka Skandamurgan from 3rd BA Economics. To what extent is public policy in India driven by economic theory rather than political considerations? And how do policymakers balance the two when they conflict?
So, well, we are a democracy. So, in the end, the people of this country are sovereign. So, if we, as the people of India, have elected a group of people to parliament, legislature, panchayat, whatever it is, and they have done the thing that the people of this country want, then the way the system is set up, we have to argue that they have done the right thing. Now, if you feel that that leads to populism, then a society will ultimately get the leaders it elects. So if you elect people who do populist things, then do not complain, because we live, after all, in a democracy where the people have asked for that thing. So that is why it is important for open debate to happen, for citizens to be aware of what is being offered by the political class. If, for example, the political class provides an option which is economically a bad idea in the long run, and the population still opts for it, well, don't blame either the economist or even the political leaders. It is we, the citizens, ultimately have to take ownership. So this is why it is important that we, the citizens of this country, take ownership and do not blame either the economists or the politicians if they are doing exactly what they were elected to do.
Next, we have Sahana Shri Ashok from 3rd BA Economics.
This will have to be maybe the last question from students. I'll take 1 or 2 questions from the non-students as well, yeah? Yes, sorry, carry on.
How can India sustain 7 to 8% economic growth to reach $30 to $40 trillion GDP by 2040 without widening existing regional and financial inequalities?
So, sustaining growth is a tricky thing. Because India is today growing at the fastest rates of any major economy in the world, we have come to assume that this is something natural that happens. But do remember that growth is earned. There is nothing natural to growth. For centuries, economies have not grown. Our own economy went into degrowth for periods of time, grew at negative rates. We have gone through colonial experiences with famines and other things. We have deindustrialized, deurbanized in various points in our history. So do not assume that growth is something that happens naturally. Growth is something that is earned. It is earned through effort of the population, of the business community, of the government that is hopefully doing good reforms. So at every point in time, just doing a few reforms and going home is not. It is a continuous effort that has to be done at every stage. At every level of government, we have to do reforms. The business community has to do its own. Academia, research, it's a collective effort of a nation. So sustaining long periods of growth requires an effort by a society to do what it needs to do those reforms. Now, sometimes those societies are non-democratic and you have a top-down vision, like in the case of China. But we are a democratic country, so this has to come from the bottom. And this is the point I was making earlier, that we have to consequently make difficult choices. Any long period of high growth will mean that you have to be willing to do things that give you benefit in the long run. For example, if you have to make a choice, should you make a choice for doing a short-term welfare program or a long-term infrastructure investment? Or do you want to lower taxes? Sometimes you may want to lower taxes because the business community requires incentives. So this is an honest conversation every society has to have with itself. And to abdicate our responsibility to the political class or blaming somebody, oh, no, we are a democracy. If we are not voting for the right kind of policies, that is our responsibility. If we are not standing up and arguing about certain things, as I said, this is a class of relatively educated people. If you're not writing about it, trying to explain why certain policies are good, if you're not participating in public debate, then you're letting the side down. So every society, in order to be able to sustain long periods of growth, will have to do difficult changes. Some of those are unpleasant, for example. It will also mean that certain parts of the country will have to think about other parts of the country growing. For example, very often we talk about the north-south divide in this country. But in fact, if you look at most economic and social indicators, India does not have a north-south divide at all. Our real divide, and I have written extensively on this so you can Google it up, the real divide in India is east-west. If you drew a line through Visakhapatnam, north-south line, everything that is west of it is much richer than what is east of it. Whether it's northeast or Bihar or West Bengal or Odisha, Jharkhand, even within states you will discover the larger states where you can tell the difference. In the larger states, the western part of it typically tends to be richer than the eastern part. So it's such a large effect. So in UP, for example, western UP is richer than eastern UP. Maharashtra, western Maharashtra is richer than eastern Maharashtra. Western Madhya Pradesh is richer than eastern Madhya Pradesh. So if you take any large state, even in states, when you divide a state up, you will have this. Telangana is richer than Andhra Pradesh. They were the same state till very recently, and yet there is an east-west. Everything is the same. Same language, same culture, everything is the same. They were even the same state. And yet you have an east-west problem. So this east-west problem has to be solved. And I have said this many times, we then need to get our eastern states to fire, which requires that the rest of the country actually subsidizes to some extent our eastern states to put in infrastructure into them so that they can begin to grow faster. This is not unfair. This is being a part of the same country means. And by the way, there was a time in the past when the eastern states were actually richer than the rest of the country. Not so long ago, just 50, 60 years ago. Kolkata was the largest industrial hub in the country, and West Bengal had a per capita income that was 27% higher than the national average in the 1960s. At that time, something called freight equalization was introduced, which allowed resources of Eastern India, like coal, for example, to be transported across the country at the same price. This is one of the reasons, by the way, other parts of the country which didn't have these natural resources benefited from the eastern country part of the country's natural resources. So it is not unfair in my view that if we make choices where balanced development of the country, where the richer parts of the country, and today the southern part of the country and the western part of the country are somewhat richer, they need to be willing to allow the central government to do some amount of resource transfer to the eastern half of the country. This is a fair thing to ask for. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
The floor is now open for questions from the audience.
Yeah, maybe some of the ones in front who have been asking for a while. The gentleman with a turban.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the insightful session. Sir, I have a question.
Yeah,
Is
but stick to questions that
Yeah.
are about economics, and not about sailing and other things that will go off in other tangents.
Is there any initiative or to encourage innovation and independent regulators, or to encourage those kind of system in terms of policy reforms and things like that?
Yes, so one of the innovation, see, ultimately risk taking in a general sum. So one of it is innovation as in scientific innovation, but more widely innovation as in risk taking by the business community, the scientific community and others. This is something that is absolutely key to growth. This is what generates the excess value generation. By the way, even the reforms I was talking as a form of innovation. This has to be encouraged as a way of life. Now, one of it is obviously policy changes. So we have become, since the last 35 odd years, since the 90s reforms, become a much more market-based system. So that hopefully provides market incentives for innovation. But there are other kinds of innovations that need to happen as well. For example, scientific community and innovation. IIT Madras, by the way, is a very good example of this. Innovation does not happen in isolation. You need to create small hubs where there is cross-fertilization of ideas, there is a culture of innovation and so on. And you will be proud as a citizen of this city to know that IIT Madras has created perhaps the best innovation cluster that exists in the country. It's, I would say, world-class. Just yesterday I went to their Discovery campus and looked at the young men and women. Most of them are in their 20s, not much older than the audience. They are designing rockets to go into space. They've already sent some into space. There was another one group that was doing drone taxis. So if you're having problems with your traffic, maybe the next time I come here, I will take a drone taxi and avoid the traffic. So they've already built some prototypes and they're flying them around. So it's not theory only, they're actually off the ground and so on. There is another group that's doing a hyperloop, you may have read about that. So that's just in one campus. Now the campus here, which is nearer to here, the city campus, they're also doing some unbelievable things. Now, many things have been needed for this. One is, there is now a lot more venture capital and other private money available. There is now an Anusandhan, government funding for them. But funding is not the only thing. As I said, you need to create a space where there is a culture of innovation. Now, I've obviously talked about scientific innovation. Now, this college probably is not a science institution, I'm assuming, for the most part. It is mostly a humanities place. But here, there are other areas of innovation that is, I was talking earlier, you're doing in media, for example, innovation. So a lot of amazing innovation will happen. For example, in the specific case of media, the innovations that are now happening in the technology field in artificial intelligence will radically change the way media and arts and all function. In the not so distant future, when you are doing media or even making a movie, a very large part of it will be completely done on an AI platform. That you can see it as a problem or you can see it as an opportunity. So this is why the culture of innovation has to be there. If we as a people are afraid of innovation and change, then we will spend and expend our energy in trying to fight what is inevitable anyway. Better that we embrace these changes, own them, and leverage them to go to the next level. And that is one of the purposes of good education. Good education is not of the specific skills we are giving you, because those specific skills will become outdated. But the idea is to teach you the culture of learning. Because if I have taught you to learn, it's like teaching somebody to fish. It's much better than giving the person a fish. So the idea is to have taught you to fish. So then what will happen is that this culture of innovation will begin to explore the world that there is. And there is no end to the innovations that you can do. You can do infinite number of innovations. The world is an ocean of innovation. So go out there, young ladies, and explore the world. It is waiting for you. Yeah, there's a question from the gentleman in front. Yes, you need a mic, sir. And this will have to be the last question because I'm beginning to tire as well.
Actually, I have written to you this question much earlier also. It is at one end, of course, the technological based economic growth, and it's also subject to its own certain challenges and vagaries. But I have now concentrated on these geographical indicators. Actually, you have been, even in your Stitched Ship and other books which you have written, I'm feeling that you are able to appreciate it. And presently, the geographical indicator is more a regulatory one, merely giving a license. But on the other hand, I think the time has come. For example, if Scotland can be very famous for its whiskey, which is a greater economy for them rather than industrial production, why not you just concentrate on this aspect of it? Promotional area of geographical indicator is absolutely absent in this country.
So I understood your...
I want you to take, because it's an economic angle.
No, so GI, see, one has to be a little careful here. I understand the importance of GI. Now, we have an intellectual property system at the central government level, which has created the framework for allowing GI tagging. But
that's only regulated.
Yes, the reason I am making this point is that this is ultimately has to be done at the local level. We can only create the framework.
No,
Sitting
I
in Delhi
would
for me...
I would suggest you to show your personal intellect, because
that is exactly what I'm saying, is that if I attempt to do this personally, I will end up actually becoming a bottleneck in the system, because there are thousands of GIs tags that need to be done. I have no way of finding out what needs to be done, where. That is not even my primary job. I have other jobs to do. So my better idea would be to simply create the framework and let it be. And to allow state governments or even local governments to use the framework to GI tag themselves. Because if I attempt to do it sitting in Delhi, I will never be able to figure out. Now, I have no idea what is the speciality of Chennai or Madurai or whatever. And this is just one state, a few cities in that state. I will go crazy. So much simpler for me to just create the framework and then come to you and say, why don't you take it up with your local government, not just government, why should it be government? It can be companies, it can be cooperatives, it can be cultural organizations. Decide what is it that you think is worthy of GI tagging. Not everything is worthy of GI tagging. You decide what is worthy of GI tagging. We have created a system at the center, a system where you can tag yourself. I don't think you should wait for the central government to come to you and tag it, because we will take forever. No, so this is exactly what I want to do. Do not rely on me, because I will very quickly become the bottleneck.
Thank you, sir, for addressing all the questions raised.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We now move on to the Ideathon presentation. I request our chief guest to take his seat off the dais. An intercollegiate student civic innovation Ideathon was conducted across Chennai, organized by the institution's Innovation Council, IIC, M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women, in association with the Bharat Centre for Reforms in Public Policy, BCRPP. After receiving 52 entries from aspiring innovators, 4 outstanding teams were shortlisted by the jury. They will now present their proposals, each with a time limit of 3 minutes. I now call upon the first team, Kavinaya M. and Shanmugapriya G., M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women.
Happy day everyone. We are Shanmugapriya Ji and Kavinaya here to present about our idea Kishan Course. So, how can a country with record food production but still lose million tons of harvested crops every year. So, one second. India have produced 354 million tons of food crops in the year 2025 to 2026, but yet the loss is 4 to 6%, which is a greater loss to the country. So the core issue is not just the shortage of the warehouses, but the visibility of the warehouses. So when we deeply investigate about the problem, we identified 4 policy gaps. So the first one is no unified visibility, where the warehouses, where the information of the storage warehouses is just scattered among different agencies. So the second one is planning disconnect from needs, and third one is manual and slow allocation. Still the process of allocation of warehouses is slow and manual. The fourth one is no real-time stock verification. So the stock verification is done in a very slow manner. This can also be one more gap in the policy. So the solution we propose is Kishan Kosh, one open real-time platform. So we have 4 main components in the Kishan Kosh. So the first one is open warehouse map, which shows the occupancy of the warehouses which is available. So the second one will be automated booking and allocation, which can be done through a app or IVR. So the third one is real timer and digital stock ledger, which will be done through an QR, which maintains a stock rotation in the warehouses. So the fourth one is demand-driven construction planning, where unmet storage search becomes data points to identify where new infrastructure is actually needed. So now let us know how the platform works.
So now we begin with the implementation roadmap. We begin with the pilot, where in a taluk we introduces we digitalizes the existing storage facility and we geotag it along with a QR-based stock lodging.
Team 1, I would like you to conclude, please.
Yeah. So after allocating these kind of digitalizing and geotagging, we can conclude with an heat deficit map, which can be utilized for the future proportion of the warehouses. So these are the measurable quantity outcomes that can be made out of the Kishan Kosh.
Team 1, your time is up. I would really like you to wrap up. We'll move on to the team 2 now.
Yes. So our vision is nothing but to integrate the fragmented warehouses information into a centric and real-time evidence-based information and a platform that bridges the information gap, because the challenge is not only about the infrastructure but the information that is being scattered. So our aim is to reduce the post-harvest losses as well as to strengthen the India's food security. Thank you.
Next, we have Shriyansh M. and Harish Nachiyappan from DG Vaishnav College. I request Team 3 to kindly be ready.
Greetings everyone in this afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. I am Harish Nachiyappan and he is Shriyansh. We are from Dwarakadas Govardhan Das Vaishnav College, first year BCom honors students. So we are here with a basic problem, which is food waste. How many of you visit restaurants often, right? Almost everyone go to a restaurant with your family and you tend to waste more of the food in your plate. We live in a culture where people collect as much as food as their plates can, but forget that their appetite cannot. Let us take an example of a pizza restaurant. You go to a pizza restaurant with your kid, and your kid tend to take out the onion and capsicum out of it, which cannot be consumable by other people. So we are here to collect those waste and convert it into something useful and adding to the national development. Over to Shriyansh.
Hello. So we at East conducted a survey and we found out that in Sangeeta restaurant around 2 kgs of kurma, 3 kgs of raita and 5 to 6 kgs of oil get wasted every day. And at ICF Tiruvallur marriage hall, we found that per 100 kgs of rice, 5 kgs of rice get wasted, 10 kgs of plate waste and 15 to 25 liters of oil get wasted at every event. Now, the policy gap that we've identified is, as of the solid waste management rules of 2026, it requires the restaurants, hotels and wedding halls to segregate their organic waste but leave them with no system to convert their effort into actual value. Now I hand over to Harish.
We present to you the solution, the E's. The E symbol itself represents the Trishul model, which has the 3 spikes. Mainly animalies, oilies and groceries. Animalies is basically converting the food items which are in protein rich for fish. We convert it into fish pellets. Moving on to oilies, the deep fried oil which cannot be utilized again are being converted into candles and detergent soaps. And the third phase is the groceries. In groceries, the food items which are rich in starch and cellulose and fiber content are being converted into biopackaging material, and we are using that to package both soaps as well as fish pellets. So I already said about the food items and the read segment. The real world implementation and roadmap.
Now about the roadmap that we're going to follow. So we are going to follow 3 phases. So the phase 1, which is the first 3 months, we're going to tie up with around 10 to 15 restaurants and wedding halls in one zone.
Team 2, I would really like you to conclude.
Yeah, sure. And for phase 2, we're going to set up our segregation and processing facility and introduce fish pellets. And for phase 3, we're going to scale up by tying up with local bodies and associations that align with Swachh Bharat mission. Okay. Yeah, I hand over it to Harish.
I'll just wrap up in 30 seconds. So basically you might wonder how we are going to facilitate all this. We have a prototype app called the Ease where restaurants, partners and delivery people will be in contact. So I'll just wrap up. So the quantifiable impact and expected public outcome. Adding on to this, we are aligning with many SDGs compared with SDG 12, SDG 13. We are aligning with SDG 13 as we are reducing landfills, and there is no methane generation when the waste is being converted into something useful. SDG 14 is water and marine protection. Since we are taking care of fish, we are under water and marine protection. We are aligning with SDG 12, which is waste to resource, converting food waste into something useful. SDG 15, sustainable bioconversion is being done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Team 3, Safia S and Nityashri K, M.O.P Vaishnav College.
Happy day everyone. So I am Nityashri and this is Safia. So we are coming from 3rd BSc CS. So we are today going to present our idea, the Smart Kuvam Corridor. So let's start with the problem. So the actual problem is the Kuvar River in Chennai is most visited unfixed problem. So as shown in the stats here, it's most polluted river in India. So everyone sees to resolve it, but nobody actually thinks to restore it. So the policy gap we have identified. So right now we have water resources for water, corporation for drainage, CMDA for land use, and CMRL for transit. On the other side, we actually have CRRT for the restoring water quality, but not the actual governance. So we also identified the other gaps, like it's actually no real-time monitoring in current project and no cleanup, and it is not seen as an infrastructure. So we are going to propose a solution like a new authority CRDA. It's basically Kuvam Riverfront Development Authority. So basically, it replaces the fragmented government. Like we have individual separate department for her. So we are combining all this and giving its ownership to the single authority. So it will manages all the public dashboard, IoT sensors, pollution data, everything. And it works as a public-private partnership. So the government sets actually the direction, and the private partners will build and maintain it. Over to Safia.
So this is the outline of our project. So I'm going to explain how it is going to be implemented and the structure and mechanism. So the first is bridge and foundation. The bridge and foundation will be built using RCC, reinforced concrete cement, and the pillars will be built in both river bank and the river bed, so it gives a strong foundation. And we have biogas extraction ventilation, which is that in near Kuvam river we will have bats mills, right? It would be sucking that. The fans, we have installed 8 fans around the bridges, and it would be sucking out every gas that senses, and we will be having sensors near that. So that sensors will be detecting, and it would be processed through the biofertilizers inside the pipe, and it would be letting out with the fresh air. Next we have sensors. We have water level sensor and water speed sensor that would be installed inside the Kuvam river, so it will be monitoring whether water level is high or not, and it would be sending the signals to the PLC, which acts as the brain, and it will be controlling whether it has to, and it will be owning the motor, and then the gates will be open. We have installed 2 main gates between...
Team 3, you need to conclude, please.
Yeah. So we will be installing 2 big gates and in the upstream and the low stream, and we will be having solar panels under. So these solar panels are installed using Solar Gar. Under this scheme we will be installing, and we will be having a parking lot with self-EV stations, and also a green space for public to use. And also we have, in future, we have metro integration. As I said, this is our blueprint, and this is how it looks.
Thank you, Team 3.
And 1 minute. And our project aligns with SDG goals, and we have separate schemes that contribute. And also the total estimation cost is 1,000 crores for a pilot stretch, and total cost around 7,000 crores. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, I'd like to call upon Team 4, Vaishnavi Shyam and Ashwika Lakshmi Kailas, M.O.P Vaishnav College.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, our principal, esteemed heads of department, faculty members and fellow students. We're Vaishnavi and Ashwika, and we're grateful for the opportunity to present before you today.
As India's cities continue to grow, the challenge is no longer identifying infrastructure needs, but ensuring that limited public funds are invested in the right projects at the right time. Current planning remains largely reactive, resulting in delayed infrastructure and inefficient capital expenditure. Although tools like MOHUA's service level benchmarks already assess infrastructure needs, there is no integrated framework that combines existing demand, future urban growth, and financing readiness to guide investment prioritization. This disconnect leads to fragmented planning and missed opportunities for more strategic and municipal investment.
Our proposal addresses these gaps through 3 complementary reforms. First is the Infrastructure Demand Index. Rather than replacing existing government metrics, the IDI integrates service-level benchmark data, sanctioned but unfunded infrastructure projects, historical construction trends, and urban growth projections to identify where infrastructure investment should be prioritized. It also incorporates implementation and financing readiness, such as institutional capacity and the municipality's ability to leverage instruments like municipal bonds or PPPs where appropriate. Secondly, we propose a Municipal Audit and Planning Committee, which meets twice a year to review project progress, update priorities using the latest urban data, and ensure investments remain aligned with changing infrastructure needs. Third, we recommend the dynamic budget allocation system, where a portion of capital expenditure remains flexible throughout the year, and which allows the governments to respond to emerging developmental patterns instead of waiting until the next annual budget cycle.
So implementation is phased over 3 years. We begin by developing the IDI and collecting municipal data. This is followed by establishing the municipal audit and planning committee and piloting the framework in selected urban local bodies in Maharashtra. Biannual reviews will be conducted to monitor and evaluate project outcomes and reallocate capital expenditure based on changing urban needs. The framework can then be integrated into existing digital governance systems and be scaled nationally.
This is a prototype of the infrastructure demand index built using data from a previous internship. While the underlying data is confidential, the prototype demonstrates how the framework functions in practice.
By combining predictive planning with adaptive budgeting and structured governance, we expect the framework to improve.
Team 4, kindly conclude.
We expect the framework to improve investment alignment by 20 to 30%, enhance public service delivery by 10 to 20%, and increase budget efficiency by 10 to 15%.
In short, our proposal helps government plan infrastructure more proactively, ensuring that public funds are invested where they're needed most. Thank you.
Congratulations to all the participating teams for presenting their innovative, thoughtful, and impactful ideas. Kindly bear with us while the stage is being set up. I now request the dignitaries to take their seats on the dais. I request Dr. Jayashree S., Vice Principal, M.O.P. Vaishnav College, to announce the winners of the Ideathon and our Chief Guest, Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, to give away the certificates and the prizes.
So let me make some brief comments on the presentations I saw. Firstly, I'm very pleased to see that the next generation is taking its role seriously and is beginning to identify problems and think about it. As I said, you will be running these systems sooner than you think. It wasn't so long ago I was sitting there and listening to people here, and it'll flip faster than you will imagine. Now let me comment on the 4 presentations. Excellent work. Congratulations. But let me show you one step that all of you did not do, which is absolutely critical. You see, remember the slide I put up there? What was the first step? It was identify the problem. So you've all done the identification of the problem. And then you've all come up with solutions. What you didn't do, and this is very important, is do the as-is mapping. Now this is a very important part of what you need to do, and I'll give you one example. There was one on the food management system of FCI, that one example. There is, maybe you've done this research, so I didn't have time to show it up here. But before you do anything, I would urge you strongly to go and map out what is the current system by which FCI looks after its, keeps track of its food. I don't know what it is, but it is worth your while to actually sit down and map it out. It may be a bad system, but the reason I'm telling you this is that some system must exist. Even if it's a bad system, map out that bad system. Because otherwise what you will do is you will do what the mistake many reformers try to do, is to simply think that they are functioning in a void where they can create a greenfield solution. But in fact, in reality, you will be mostly functioning in a brownfield environment. So to know what it is that you're replacing is a very important. Do remember, those who created the system that exists were like you once upon a time. They created it for whatever reason, given the technology, etc. They ended up here. Some thought will have gone into it. So sit there, very likely that the solution that you will find will follow some 80-20 Pareto principle. That you will be able to achieve most of what you are trying to achieve with 20% of the effort if you know exactly what you are targeting. This is true of all the other presentations as well. So for example, the one on the Chennai water body, river or whatever thing. Go out there to that water body before you begin spending thousands of crores of rupees. Go out and look at what exactly is polluting that water body. Very likely again, 80% of the pollution comes from 20% of the inlets into that water body. Simply solving something relatively targeted in those will dramatically simplify whatever it is that you're trying to achieve without having to go out and do these grand projects. Everybody likes to do grand projects, but you will actually not solve anything unless you do the as-is mapping. True of any other project anybody in this room wants to do. Go out, and this is a painful thing to do, and that is why making change is a painful thing and difficult thing. But if you do not do the as-is step, you are letting yourself down. So I hope that is hopefully a useful feedback to you.
Thank you, sir. The point well taken. The intercollegiate competition on student civic innovation ideathon received 52 entries, and the jury have shortlisted top 3 teams and 1 team for the special mention. I request the winners to come up onto the stage. Request the chief guest and the other dignitaries to distribute the certificates. Every team gets a cash prize of 5,000 rupees. Kavinaya M and Shanmugapriya G. Kisan Kosh from Storage Gaps to Smarter Governance. Second MSc Food Technology Management, M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women. Nityashri K and Safia S. One River 3 Solutions, the Smart Kuvam Corridor. Third BSc Computer Science, M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women. Vaishnavi Shyam and Ashwika Lakshmi Kailash. Infrastructure Demand Index, Predictive Municipal Budget Allocation. The team is from 2nd BA Economics. Vaishnavi Shyam and Ashwika Lakshmi Kailash, 2nd BA Economics, M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women. Shriyansh and Harish Nachiepan, the team from BCom Honors, DG Vaishnav College, on the topic, the EASE project, Fish EASE and Grosser EASE, Plate Waste to Aqua Feed. Congratulations to the participants. Thank you, sirs. Thank you, ma'am.
I request Mr. Shravana Deepan, Chartered Accountant and Joint Secretary, Bharat Centre for Reforms and Public Policy, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Respected Shri Sanjeev Sanyal ji, Dr. Archana Prasad, Shri Sundar Raman sir, distinguished guests, faculty members, students, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the close of this enriching session, it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, I express our heartfelt gratitude to the chief guest, Hon'ble Sanjeev Sanyal ji, for taking his time out amidst this busy schedule today. And his insightful address on economic reforms has given us all something to ponder upon. We are deeply grateful, sir, for your valuable guidance. I thank Dr. Archana Prasad, Principal, M.O.P Vaishnav College for Women, for graciously hosting this program and extending every support to make today's event a success. Thanks to Mr. S. Sundar Raman, Secretary of Bharat Centre for Reforms and Public Policy, for his leadership in organizing this dialogue and bringing together such an inspiring platform for students and policy enthusiasts. I congratulate all the participants and winners of the Ideathon. Your ideas remind us that the future of India lies in creativity and commitment. And I also thank the faculty members, volunteers, organizing committee, technical team, media, the professionals who have joined us here, everyone and who has worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event a success. Finally, thank you students, guests, teachers, participants, everybody for making this event a more meaningful and insightful one. On behalf of Bharat Centre for Reforms and Public Policy, thank you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As we conclude today's program, let us carry forward the ideas we have shared, the conversations we have begun, and the responsibility we hold as the youth of our nation. The future of India will be shaped not only by great policies, but young minds with the vision to question, innovate, and lead. We request the audience to kindly rise for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
I kindly request the audience to remain seated till the dignitaries exit the venue. Thank you.